Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
Yeah.
And soon you'll be able to find us in our prop guide, which is coming out this week.
Very soon, in
Be
final edits
excited.
right now.
DM us if you are not on the list but would like to be on the list for the California props. Also, DM us if you just want our opinion on your ballot. We offer that to people.
Yeah. We're about to start looking into the New Jersey ballot just because we were asked. We'll do it.
We'll do any ballot research that you yourself are too lazy or confused to do. We won't judge you for it. We know ballots are hard.
And certainly if you live in California, you might be too confused to do it.
And certainly you might not have time. I mean, even with the pandemic, you might not have time because that took weeks of research to have informed opinions on all of these ballot measures. We're going to cover another 2 of them on this podcast, but we are also going to do a special ballot measure only podcast.
Ballot blowout.
Talk you through the whole thing, the ballot blowout.
Yep.
Brent writes promos, so he knows how to effectively advertise our ballot bonanza. But
so
ballot bonanza, apparently we're both experts. In any case, RBG, the service was this week. She is the first woman ever to lie in state, which is so mind-blowing, and also immediately made me have to Google whether Sandra Day O'Connor was alive or dead. Because I was like, wasn't she a Supreme Court justice who's no longer one? But she's also an alive person who is the same age as RBG. Basically.
Yeah, just had the good sense to retire a retirement age.
Right, has probably been enjoying frolicking in her old age.
Totally.
Or not frolicking because it's hard to frolic in your 90s. But she turns 90 this year, but still kicking. In any case. They had to extend her formal ceremony, RBG's formal ceremony, because so many people were going to pay their respects.
Right. When she was outside of the
Supreme
when she was
Court.
outside of the Supreme, she was supposed to be there for a day, and they extended it because they could tell that was not going to cut it. Yeah.
Well, and this is where a theory that originally came from election profit makers and then was passed on to me by my friend Kat, really blew my mind in its brilliance and also in its embrace of the kind of political theater that I most love, which is we've been at the edge of our seats all week because Donald Trump said he was going to wait until the end of RBG's services before he announced who he was going to replace her with. And obviously there's a lot of tension about whether he should be doing this at all. And obviously he was just doing this to goad us. And also obviously he himself leaked the name before he officially announced it in the middle of her service anyway. So he didn't abide by his own rule. But after he said that, the next Democrat that went on television should have said, that's great. Our services for RBG will be 3 months long. Every Democrat in America will speak at them, including some people that aren't Democrats and just some random interested onlookers. And we will be holding a 24-hour vigil for the next 3 months. Sign up for your slot.
Like a filibuster vigil.
They should have filibustered his pick via vigil. Because then even when he decided to do it, the headline would be that in defiance of his own promise, Donald Trump named Supreme Court justice while people are still memorializing RBG. Like the headlines would have been so brilliant.
Yeah.
The theater would have been brilliant. We have like 3 24-hour news networks and about 100 digital 24-hour news networks who need footage of something happening all day, every day. And just think that something, the thing that they go to when they have nothing better to cover, could have been Democrats talking about the glory of reproductive rights. And instead, it's going to be Donald Trump.
And we're going to tell you what Democrats actually can do, and it's mostly theater anyway. So
the thing is, once you're in a world where like norms don't exist and everything's falling apart, political theater is something you should embrace willingly. It is maybe the only last honorable move that you have. So the idea that the Democrats are like this bad at political theater when they've been watching the best of the best do it on the Republican side for over a decade is mind-boggling to me. Like, come in with something ridiculous that grabs a headline that gives you the podium that makes everyone listen to what you're saying. And then when you have the podium, you're on the podium, and that's great. That's not Donald Trump being on the podium.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at the podium. It just doesn't make any sense to approach this as if we're going to be honorable and respectful. I mean, this is a woman whose last wish had to be that she didn't want some obscure political procedural move to get pulled. Like, that's the world we're in. Like, honor her wishes by going hard.
Yeah.
In any case. Trump went to pay his respects, as he is forced to do as president, and got booed by protesters while he was there, although he pretended like he couldn't hear what the faraway chants were saying.
Yeah, he got booed. And I will say that does rarely happen to him because, which is weird because you think about Trump being who he is and like more than half of America hating him vehemently.
Right.
But like usually when he goes outside, he is greeted, with
cleared the
onlookers
area.
who are very excited to see him, right?
They cleared the area of anyone suspicious.
Right. So like for him to go somewhere and then be booed and then have a chant of vote him out happen was probably like, it probably was hard for him to hear in the sense that like it was not a thing that his brain is used to processing.
Yeah. And it also created in his preferred medium of television, it created a visual that I'm sure was really disconcerting to him. And I think that's really what we have to remember. It doesn't matter what he experienced in the moment. The reason that it's going to be upsetting to him is because the clip is so bizarre.
Right.
And he's so uncomfortable in the clip. And also, he needs more mask wearing practice because he's wearing his mask in a really weird way in that clip. Have you noticed? It's like almost covering his eyes.
Oh no.
It's like so far up on his face.
I mean, at least he's got it over his nose.
I mean, I know that was why I noticed this, is because I was checking to make sure all of the right orifices were being covered by the mask. But he was like, it was like the mask was like inching its way all the way up his face.
Sure.
It looked like he is a child who got caught in a turtleneck or something. It was so weird. In any case, so he did leak his own SCOTUS pick at the time, the exact moment that he said he wouldn't, and then officially announced it the next day.
Yeah.
It's Amy Coney Barrett, who was someone who we discussed during the Kavanaugh era.
Right, exactly.
And the reason that we thought that they didn't pick her that time was because she's in a cult.
Right. I mean, listen.
Why let that stop us now?
I know. We could go through all of the things of, we could go through each of her rulings and over the, past decades of her, being a judge and various things. But like, we don't need to do that because that she's terrible. You know that she's going to be bad on women's issues. She's going to be bad on equal rights. She's going to be bad on LGBTQ issues. She's going to be bad on all of the issues that you would want her to be good on. We don't need to take you through a tour of all of her decisions.
And also, when I had this conversation with my mom last week where my mom was like, and she's going to lie on, during the hearing, and we're going to have to listen to that. And I was like, remember that you said this, because don't waste the emotional energy on the day of the hearing being shocked that she lied.
When she does, right, of course.
Going to do that. So all of these things, don't waste your emotional energy being shocked. Be angry, sure.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be shocked that she's going to be bad on equal rights. That's a given, and you already know it. So you don't have to relearn it ever. You only have to know it once. So keep that in mind as we tell you about something legitimately shocking about her.
Exactly, because she is in a cult, as you mentioned.
That's right. And a patriarchal cult, not a fun free love cult. I'm sort of like, if you want to be a Supreme Court justice and you're in a free love cult, like that's your business and I have nothing to do with it. If your cult involves having to live under structures that mean that you are like serving a man, and that man is your quote unquote head, then you, as a supposedly independent justice, are someone I worry about.
Exactly. Well, and this is giving me a lot of, listen, if you are not watching The Vow on HBO or listening to whatever podcast that Lila is listening to right now.
Escaping NXIVM is the podcast that I think that The Vow is based on, but it's basically the same thing.
Which is, it's so good. The show is so good. I'm sure the podcast is good too. I'll probably listen to it since I'm now obsessed with it. But it's about NXIVM, which isn't a religious cult per se, but it does have an element where like there's this like offshoot women's group.
It's also
where
they've taken very Scientological.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's a Scientology-ish cult.
Right. But specifically like this women's offshoot like has a master and slave element. Like each person has like their master that they have to, those are the words that they actually use. Yes. And like this is giving me a lot of that vibe, but it's like it's supposedly Catholicism, which
it's Handmaid's Tale Catholicism.
Totally. Yeah.
Is what it is.
It's a covenant community. So you do have to take a vow to be in it. And it's supposedly highly authoritarian. Like you have to, and if you don't have a head, if you don't have a husband, then like you're supposed to live. So there is a communal aspect because then you're supposed to like live in, there are communal groups of these where women
people of praise
live,
houses.
right, like live together and pool all of their money. But even when they pool all of their money together, they're still ahead. So it's like there's like groups of women living together. I think there's like one in Indiana where like 20 women live together. They all work and then they all pool their money together. And then a head decides how it gets used, which is a man.
Which is not, by the way, I had a friend once who was living in a socialist commune and they pooled all their money together. And so, you know, in practice, we're living a lifestyle similar to this, except for that they all communally decided everything, which was the point. It was a consensus community.
Right.
That's the difference between, if you want to live in a community and pool your money, like go forth. I mean,
yeah, sure.
I'm the one who's sitting here saying that people should be allowed to marry as many people as they want. If they want to merge assets with all those people, like that's certainly not my business. Sounds terrible, but do you? But I certainly don't think that a hierarchical institution is the greatest way to live that lifestyle. And if you want to live that lifestyle, that's fine, but certainly don't impose the values that you have in that lifestyle on the entire American people.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, there's a few reasons why, look, there's two different ways to look at this. I think there are going to be a lot of Democrats who are, for reasonable reasons, going to be scared about bringing this up in her confirmation hearings. Right. Because like anytime you get into religion, you're going to start sort of like offending people. You're going to get into this whole thing where it's like, you don't want to be seen as like the, you know, the anti-religion party, which Democrats are sort of like always fighting against anyway. Also, you've got Joe Biden, who's a Catholic, who's doing better with Catholic voters. Like,
well, and
there's
you
reasons
also,
why
you already have Republicans trying to seize on this by saying that the Democrats are anti-Catholic because they're complaining about her cult.
Right, exactly. But I think that there's a few reasons that if they explain it well, which they're bad at doing, so I can't count on that. But like, there's reasons, there's a couple good reasons why it actually makes sense for them to hit this. It makes her sound like a crazy person. Right. But besides that, she has said over the years that, you know, she recently claims that like her religion and like this specific like cult that she's in, which obviously she doesn't call a cult, but she said doesn't have any sort of like bearings on her rulings. But she has also been quoted over the years as saying, quote, legal careers ought not to be seen as as a means of gaining satisfaction, prestige, or money, but rather, quote, as a means to the end of serving God. So like she has said that her rulings are intended to serve God. So she uses her faith specifically in her rulings. So like that gives you, I think, carte blanche to bring it up. And then also, I think it's a reasonable thing to say, hey, you took a vow to this thing, but the vow you should really be taking here as a Supreme Court justice is to the Constitution. So like those vows then become, you know, antithetical to each other.
Well, and also if your life is lived in a hierarchical institution in which you are not in charge of decisions about your own life.
Well, I was going to say, right. Does your husband get to, we should have a hearing for her husband also. Then.
Exactly. Like to what extent are you able to be an impartial justice in a world in which you don't defer to your own rulings in your life?
Yeah.
Like, I think that these are all kind of, you know, questions that I think, here's what I think. I think the one saving grace we have here is that Kamala Harris has got to get some voters in the door. So if they hold these hearings before Election Day, she's on that committee, you know, I feel like she is going to be interested in some high theater.
Totally.
Now, and she, I think in that context is capable of high theater.
I do too.
And I think that whole judiciary, that Senate Judiciary Committee is actually pretty capable of high theater.
They are.
Because I'm hoping that they go balls to the wall, though. Like, I'm worried that because she's running for vice president, that she's not going to commit herself to the kind of nasty theater that she, I think, would actually be really good at, where what she's good at is being impossible when she's questioning someone. She can be cruel on the stand. That's where she really is most powerful and most, you know, sort of
she's going to worry about coming off as like the angry one and the anti-religion one and the whatever else. Yeah.
And I'm worried about that because that's where she's our weapon.
I was going to say, she's
not
a huge
weapon on the
asset
campaign trail. She's an asset to us in the Judiciary Committee hearings. And so there's two sides to that coin, because one is she may be trying to be like, remember why you loved me in the first place? Because the only reason she's in this position is because of the Kavanaugh hearing.
Totally.
That's why she's running for vice president right now.
Yeah.
So it could be that, but it also could be that she, like so many Democrats, shies away from her starring moment.
Right.
Which I'm worried about her doing that. I'm worried about Cory Booker doing that. I'm not worried about Mazie Hirono doing that because what does she have to lose?
Yeah.
But I'm worried about almost every other one of them.
Yeah.
You know, I think
agree.
that is going to be, and it's going to be hard because it's a lot easier for, you know, an Amy Klobuchar to go head to head with like a misogynistic male asshole than it's going to be with this woman.
Yep.
Just from a theater point of view.
Right.
Not from obviously she is another person who I think is incredibly capable in that context.
Usually.
But I don't know. I worry about their theater instincts.
Yeah.
In any case, Lindsey Graham, who is the Judiciary Chair in the Senate, says the confirmation hearings are set to begin on October 12th. So they're really getting to it.
Yeah.
Rushing through.
He made the point to say that like 24 of the 42 Supreme Court justices hearings were held within 16 days. So it's
Here's the thing.
Okay.
That's an arbitrary
just over
fact.
half. I know. I was going to say,
50,
great.
Like, that's not a precedent or a tradition in any way. That's just a coincidence.
Right. I was going to say 18 of the 42 were not. So like, here we are.
Right. Like this, I mean, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Just over half of this is sometimes a tradition that we've adhered to by accident because of the nature of the circumstances that those specific cases were in. Also, what years were those 24? Were they all before 1800? Because it could be. We don't have any context from this either.
Yeah, we don't.
So in any case, nice try, Lindsey Graham, with your arbitrary stats.
Yeah.
Americans are really bad at reading and understanding stats, so maybe that's going to work. But I read that and I was like, come on.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
So in any case, they're going to really try to get through it in a couple days, get her out of committee by October 26th, and head straight into an election day with an incredibly unpopular Supreme Court justice that they've just rammed down our throats in defiance of the rules that they set. And then hope against hope that somehow rescues their electoral prospects.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, we're going to get in. I mean, I think the one thing that Republicans are good at is sort of like not caring about the immediate fallout when they can have 40 years of fallout that suits them. You know, they're better at the long game here. So I think if they lose a couple Senate seats in November, they'll just carry on with their lives, probably. But we're gonna talk about the political fallout in a little bit, because I think there will be immediate political fallout for that, probably.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
I'm thinking about this though, actually, and like the more that I think about this, the more that I see that we're playing a game that suits them, because you know they get 40 years of authoritarian rule in the courts or whatever. But also, there are a lot of Republicans that I know are uncomfortable with the way that the governance, the way that Donald Trump governs, are uncomfortable with the way that the party, is sort of operating right now, and are really politically much more aligned with centrist Democrats. And because the centrist Democrats are so far to the right at this point that they are just in the Republican Party in a different part of it that is like the old Republican Party.
Yeah.
I think if you are like, and I know he's not in office, but like a Jeff Flake Republican, then what you get is everything, because you get a pro-corporate majority no matter who's elected.
Yep.
And so you don't care if you retain, then it's off your, then it's suddenly not your fault anymore. Like nothing is your fault once you're not in the majority if you're a Republican. So you get the courts protecting your interests, and by your, I mean corporate interests. You get a party that's going to do nothing about that in power. You get the end of this very uncomfortable and sort of unpredictable era where you don't really understand how your own party's operating or what your voters are up to, but it's fucking bananas. And so you actually win everything. The people that lose in this scenario are just regular Democrats who don't get represented well at the federal level, because certainly Joe Biden doesn't represent the views of a majority of Democrats. And we're not going to have a Congress, we're not going to have a Senate, certainly, that represents the views of a majority of Democrats, at least, equitably. The House is going to do nothing. So we're going to have three chambers that we theoretically control, but have no say over any, have no sort of parallels to politically, and courts that are so incredibly conservative that they defy brain logic, and nowhere to vent those frustrations, because we're theoretically in power. So we should be able to just stop complaining now. Right. So they're fucking winning anyway.
They are.
They should hope to lose the Senate. It gets them out of McConnell's hair. They don't want to deal with Mitch McConnell either. He's an asshole.
Yeah.
There is no way that those guys love hanging out with Mitch McConnell. Nobody
they,
likes hanging out with Mitch McConnell. They're
no.
terrified of Mitch McConnell. He's ruthless and ridiculous.
Yep.
They feel very uncomfortable with the fact that he whips votes that they don't want to have to make all the time for ridiculous ideas, and then also forces them to vote against things that their own constituents might like.
Yeah.
You know, and so they want him out of their hair.
Yeah.
So this is just, we gotta play a better game, you guys. It's one of the games.
And here's some of the options of the games that they can play if they want to play. And it seems like early stages give me minimal hope. Look,
which is more than no hope. Which is more than
no hope. And look, first off, we should tell you that if you are holding out hope that she is not going to end up on the Supreme Court, you should stop having that hope. That is a false sense of hope. We are not here to give you that hope. No. The only sense of hope that we can sort of give you, and this is what I think Democrats are really trying to do. We told you last week about how like the idea is to potentially pack the courts once they get in power, although I don't even know that they really want to do that. We've already seen a few of the, like Dianne Feinstein think that she doesn't want to do that, but she's
I also have a theory about a strategy that they will actually pursue if it's a Biden-esque group of people, which is John Roberts does not want this to be the court that he's remembered for. The court's losing all credibility under him. I think that they will work out a deal with John Roberts where some of those conservative justices retire. I think that's more likely the outcome we're looking at if we ever get back to a semblance of even half logic, because John Roberts does not want this. The reason you see John Roberts ruling with the liberal justices on a whole slew of things in the last few years is because John Roberts does not want his court to be remembered as the final Supreme Court. He doesn't want to be the man who destroyed the Supreme Court. No. So I think we have some leverage inside the court anyway, once reason can prevail. But this woman is going to be on the court, so just deal with that.
Yeah, she's going to be on the court. What the hope that we can maybe give you, and which may be also false hope, but it's at least the only hope that I have is that we can maybe push the vote and long enough that she doesn't get to hear arguments that are scheduled for November 10th on which would when they are going to hear the arguments of the Trump administration to try and invalidate the Affordable Care Act. Yeah. So that's what I think their game is right now, because they know that they can't do anything since now all you need is a simple majority to seat her. Like, there's not enough Republicans. We found out this week that only the two that you would think that they often give permission to say that they are going to vote no on, like covered. Collins and Murkowski, they're covered. But we know that Romney's going to vote for the judge. We know that some of these other people who have said that they weren't, Cory Gardner's going to vote for the judge.
Let me just say that if you were thinking to yourself, I voted for Mitt Romney because I'm a Republican, but at least he's a principled Republican, fuck all the way off.
Well, yeah,
he's folded under every pressure.
Yeah, right.
He's worthless to you.
Yeah.
He's not standing up to the Trump administration, and don't even think for a second that he is.
Right.
Moving on.
So there's some things that the Democrats could pull, and they would have to pull all of them repeatedly over a consistent period of time over the next month.
Sorry, that's what the American people have hired them to do. So just
right. And so I think that they should do it, and it seems like potentially there's interest. We had Tim Kaine this week say something to the effect of, where he said, we can't do business as usual in a situation that's so extraordinary where the Republicans are breaking their word to Russian nominees so they can kill the Affordable Care Act. We can't just say, oh yeah, that's normal, sorry. We're going to tell you about some of the things that they can do, and then about how some of the more conservative members of the party reacted to it, because they sort of reacted to it in a way that was a little bit surprising to me. But here's the things that they can do. They started this week with a surprise to everyone. So that also made me feel good, because nobody saw this coming, because Schumer invoked what's called the 2-hour rule, which is this rarely used rule that can halt all committee business after the Senate has been in session for more than 2 hours. And he pulled it this week and forced a hearing to basically be shut down on something. It wasn't about this, obviously. And everybody was like, oh shit. And then they had to stop doing business for the day. And everybody was like, what is this even? So they could be doing that on days that there are confirmation hearings.
Try to stretch out those confirmation hearings.
Try and stretch them all out.
2-hour chunks per day.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly, yeah. So that is an interesting one, and we've already seen it happen. So it's clear that they seem like that's something that they are willing to use. And that almost seemed like a little bit of like putting a flag in the ground
Right.
at the beginning
this
of
was
this.
meant as a preemptive threat.
Yeah, this was like a we are not messing around thing. And for Schumer to do something like that is not nothing.
Considering that our previous expectation of him is that he would literally do nothing but roll over.
Right. They can also slow down legislative business, which again doesn't necessarily have anything specifically to do with those hearings. But the more that you slow down legislative business and you use this sort of like in conjunction with some of these other things, like the 2-hour rule, then you start to sort of like see a plan start to happen that you could just push this down the road a little bit. So they can finish up, the Senate can finish up their work on a bill or a nomination quickly, like with the agreement of all 100 senators. That rarely happens anyway. But even just this week, again, the Democrats in the Senate refused to quickly pass a government funding bill, which is going to require McConnell to have a cloture vote, which then will set up the vote for later in the week. And so that is like now something that they're going to have to deal with next week when they're probably going to be trying to get ready for these committee hearings. And again, if that's work that they have to do, then again, if you couple that with the 2-hour rule and you force them to work on this for 2 hours, then you can shut down the hearings for the day. So like they can start doing things like this. They could also object to a recess, which again wouldn't really do much, but it would sort of force senators to stay there, which really what that does is kind of like keep Republicans there and not going home to campaign. So
I was going to say the one thing that they have, the one piece of leverage the Democrats have is that there are some really vulnerable Republicans who are currently looking at losing their seats, who probably want to keep those seats, and they can make it impossible for them to campaign.
Right.
Which means those Republicans are going to start to put some pressure, theoretically, it won't work, but theoretically on their leadership to be like, we have to figure something out because we're not going to be able to keep our seats if we don't figure something out.
And this is sort of like, I think, a more long-term plan just in terms of, I mean, long-term in the sense of like November. But I think that this is, the idea here is that if this can play even a minor role in some of these guys losing their seats, that's more pickup for them. And that's more than leeway that they have to play with when they do sort of try and deal with the courts in the Senate after the election and after the new Senate is seated in January. So they can also deny a quorum. So like in the Senate right now, in order to conduct business, you have to have a quorum, which is a majority of senators to be present. And actually right now, that's a little, would be tricky if you were doing that, because if even just a few Republicans were gone, Democrats could boycott the quorum call and then they wouldn't have a quorum. And like right now, it's sort of rare that they are all there because a lot of them are campaigning.
Yeah.
So like if you catch
general,
them on
it's rare that all senators are there.
Right. So if you decide to do this, you could basically just like not have a quorum and then not do anything. So that's another thing.
So that also is intended to further punish the campaigning Republicans because they're going to keep getting called back at times. You know, and we're talking about Republicans that are in states where it's quite a bit of travel distance that they have to cover. So, you know, getting to Colorado is not that quick from DC. Getting to Arizona is not that quick from DC. So we're talking about senators that are going to have sort of really frustrating travel, impositions placed on them if the Democrats start boycotting quorum.
Yeah.
Boycotting sessions. Yeah.
They can also continually ask for points of order and motions to adjourn. So like,
Republicans do this all the time, by the way.
They totally do, yeah. Any senator, like any single senator out of the 100 that are there can ask for what's called a point of order, which basically like requests whoever the presiding officer is on that day a procedural question. And if the senator who asks that question disagrees with the answer they get from the presiding officer, then they can appeal it, which triggers a roll call vote. And then that requires all the senators to vote. And it also, like, I think you have to spend at least a certain amount of time debating that ruling that you got from the presiding officer as well. So if you did,
you see them bullshit like this in committee a lot,
right?
You know, where they're always asking for points of order about because some Democrat is speaking,
right? So that you could do that for days.
I mean, all day, every day.
Yeah.
You get one Jim Jordan in there, and you have nothing but point of order conversations for the next 6 years, and that's another thing that you could do for 3 months if you needed to.
Yep. And you can also request series of votes to adjourn or to recess, and that takes time.
I would
not a
also
ton of
say
time,
that
but
one thing that regular people who are feeling very powerless can do, I think, to contribute to this is make clear that if our candidates can't be in town to campaign to us, that we will cover for them. We'll do the work. I think, everyone, it focuses on the presidential race every year, and it's hard this year because nobody likes Joe Biden. And so it's like, what do you even tell people to get them to vote? But there are some really important Senate races happening. And that includes some Senate races where we are protecting seats that we currently have. And then some others where we are going to be able to exploit the absence of some working senators in order to get them out of office. So I think that if you are feeling like, what can I do as a person in order to assist these people, make it so they don't have to be in their district.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let them go on vacation and then campaign to you. Tell them you want them in Washington causing trouble. And you say, we'll pick up the slack. We'll go call the people for you.
Right, exactly.
That's, I think, what regular people can do to contribute here.
Right.
Because I think we want to make it so that the Democrats don't need to be in their district until Election Day.
Right.
That they can stay working this out, and they can force the Republicans to stay there with them. And in doing that, we will pick up the slack for them.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
anyway. we can also get the House on board. There's minimal things that they can do since they don't deal with this at all, but there are weird things like they can take up a war powers resolution,
right.
which if they pass something like that, then that has to be voted on in the Senate.
Do one every day.
Right, like the Democrats could bring that up in the Senate, like a war power. Like there's a few things that the minority party can bring up for a vote in the Senate, but that's one of them. There were some that floated the idea of impeaching either the president again or Attorney General Bill Barr. That sort of fizzled out because Republicans could ultimately vote to dismiss the trial altogether in the Senate, but make them do that too.
Right.
Well,
and also I think,
and
the
also
one
cause a big scene. The more scenes we can be causing, I think.
Yes, I think that's where we don't think strategically is
right.
They have been doing illegal shit this whole time.
Right.
And they don't. First of all, it turns out there's no retribution.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you do. So there's no rules anymore.
Right.
So
I mean, Republicans would be calling in bomb threats to the Capitol.
Right.
I mean,
without shame.
We've got to be thinking like that. Unfortunately, I'm not saying that you should do
that. It's not right. It's not great, but it's like Republicans would be trying literally anything and everything. And here's the other thing I think, which is something that I've been thinking about a lot as I've been talking to you guys and to Brent and ranting to my mom about how I just don't feel like the people currently in office are up to this moment.
Yeah.
It is my feeling that, because we're in an authoritarian moment where the regime is not playing by traditional rules, there's a chance that things that work for Republicans don't work for us. That our lawmakers get arrested for things that Republicans have been doing without, care. I also think that if you are a Chuck Schumer in this moment in American history and you get arrested, that's tough. You signed up to serve the American people, and you should really be willing to lay down your career in life to do that to some extent. Yeah. That's the job. And I know that the job has mostly been handshaking with Republicans and going to cocktail parties with them up until this point. And I'm sorry that it didn't continue in that vein. But I think at a certain point you have to be like, okay, we have to be willing to play hardball knowing that there might be consequences for us. But we actually have to be willing to take those consequences because this has to be that important. Yeah. If you are willing to say to me on Twitter that the entire government is going to fall apart if we allow Donald Trump to get away with his agenda, and then you're going to tell me that the only thing I can do is vote, then
I know.
The people that I voted in have to be able to do something about it, or there's no point in me doing the vote thing. If you are going to just tweet at me about how I should vote, show me what a vote buys you.
Yeah. There's a great TikTok going around right now. I sent it to you, but it's somebody being like, Donald Trump is doing this. There's the Supreme Court thing or whatever. Tell me what we can do. And then it's
it's just crickets.
Right. It's crickets. And then it's you can vote. And then the person is vote, I can vote. That's what I can do. And yes, you should. And as
always vote.
And just as a human citizen, that is sort of what you yourself sort of are left to do, other than, maybe calling people and you said, making sure that your elected officials, but the elected officials,
they're in the room.
Right. When Nancy Pelosi comes out and is well, you can just go vote. You should the right response to that is like chucking something at your television.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
because I think if all I can do is vote to elect people who, when a moment of courage is required, can't deliver that moment, then my vote has not done what you are trying to tell me it does.
Right. What did that accomplish?
It accomplished nothing. Right. And I think, in authoritarian regimes, politicians end up in jail. There are, things get nuts. But like, if we're in one of those moments, which is the rhetoric that you're hearing from Democrats, is that we are in one of those moments. If we are in one of those moments, then you need to be able to act with the courage of some of the world's greatest resistors and greatest revolutionary leaders, and know that you are now in a different era of American politics where that stuff might happen to you, but also you can only, you have to still pursue what's right.
Yeah.
And I think, some of these procedural moves, it's like, it's cute. But like, I also think there needs to be a sort of secondary choice being made where they're like, if I have to go to jail to stop this, because millions of people will literally lose their healthcare and therefore quality of life if I don't do that, and also the entire government as we know it is going to crumble, then that's unfortunately, as the person who wanted to be in the room, that's a responsibility I undertook, and that's too bad. There's a reason not everyone wants to go to Congress, you guys. Right.
Well,
it's a lot of responsibility.
And I would say, and another thing that we can do, similarly to what you said in terms of like, making sure your elected officials know that we've got you covered back in your district, like in terms of like, we will do the calling and we will do the texting and we will donate to you and we will do whatever it is that we will do to sort of like make sure that you will be reelected. You can also let them know that if they pull some sort of stunt like this, that they will also be rewarded. Right. And I think that I think that they would be. And I think that they always fear like some sort of electoral fallout for like making some sort of move like this. But like if Chuck Schumer got arrested making a scene trying to make sure that Amy Coney Barrett didn't get nominated to the Supreme Court for 40 years, he would never be primaried ever again in his life. He's worried about a primary in 2022. If he did something like that, he would not have to worry about that primary.
I think that the Markey experience actually illustrates this perfectly. Because Ed Markey was like a nothing congressman who became a nothing senator who has never stood up for anything interesting in his life until he became the lead sponsor of the Green New Deal, which was supposed to be, the reason they're not supporting it is it's going to be, it's a political death wish for all of the industry in their communities or whatever. Like, there's all these Democrats who won't support it because it's so radical and so insane they would never be reelected. And that is what saved his seat for him, was that one choice. He hasn't done anything else to stand out at any other time in history. That one choice saved his seat. You have to be, and why did the squad get put back in office with huge majorities? It is, or, where they were fending off primaries with huge majorities. It's because they have been willing to take stands. So I think to tell your constituents that we are in a crisis moment and then refuse to think creatively about how to act in that crisis moment is a recipe for literally every single incumbent losing their seat. Because every single one of these people who doesn't act in this moment is going to be primaried by a stronger challenger.
Totally.
And if it doesn't happen in their next cycle, it'll happen in the one.
And they will point to this.
None of these people are, and they're going to point to this. This is going to be the moment they point to. And so if you are worried about what this means moving forward, not just for the American people, but for your job, this is a moment to try a thing. And to not be, listen, there will be an attack ad made about you, but
of course.
Some of the best politicians have the most crazy attack ads made against them. That's if you don't have a crazy attack ad against you, then you have not been doing anything in office. It's like, you haven't accomplished anything. In any case. The other thing they can try to do is delay the final committee vote. Or no, wait, sorry. And that we already talked about that. They're just, what I meant to say was they are going to, and I think we mentioned it already, going to try to delay the final committee vote if they can't stop it until after the 10th of November, because that's the AC hearing. We already talked about it. I was just rehashing a conversation we had because I got carried away about my own theories.
Sure. They were good theories.
In any case, we're hearing from some moderates that they're like willing to do something, which is at least a thing.
I mean, Doug Jones seems to be on board for whatever. I think he probably knows that he's going to lose his seat, so that's fine. But whatever. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be the one to make a scene.
Well, I was going to say maybe he can act, and then he might be
the perfect one to make a scene, right?
Well, I have been wondering this about the Republicans this whole time. Like Susan Collins, there came a point in the Susan Collins saga where I was like, she's not going to get reelected. And so now is the time to actually stand up because who fucking cares anymore?
Right.
And I feel like I felt that way with Jeff Flake before he retired.
Yeah.
Like we have all these retirements that go on where they don't do anything bold on the way out. The only person who was bold on the way out was John McCain, and he was dying.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I think if Susan Collins had done differently on the Kavanaugh hearing right now, I don't think that she would be in the situation that she's in right now.
No.
So
she would be in office instead of worrying about having to keep a conservative voting record so that she can get a lobbying job later.
Yeah.
But also, she's old enough to retire, so she shouldn't even be worrying about her next step.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Yeah, so John Tester was sort of saying that he's not going to second guess Schumer. So he sort of implied he's on board for whatever the Senate comes up with.
Right. Even Joe Manchin, after Schumer invoked the 2-hour rule, said, kind of funny. He said, hell, we don't do anything around here anyway. We've got plenty of times to do meetings. They can reschedule them. So, because you would be worried about what Joe Manchin was going to think, right?
Right. Who doesn't care deeply about the Joe Manchin experience?
Anyway, you know, you kind of talked about how, like, even if this does fail electorally for them, like, they still get everything that they want from Republicans. But I do think that Democrats, at least in the near term, are seeing blood on this. Blood in the water here, because I think, you know, we've talked many a times about how they should continue to talk about healthcare in 2020 because it worked so well for them in 2018, and we didn't think that they had been doing it quite enough. But the idea that they want to seat her in time to be able to make sure that the Affordable Care Act gets, you know, thrown out the window, it's leaving them a huge issue on the table that they can hammer home for the next 40 days. And even Joe Biden, who is often late to the game on knowing what to say about anything, had a press conference this week where he was like, it's no mystery what's happening here. President Trump is trying to throw out the Affordable Care Act. He's been trying to do it for years. The Republican Party has been trying to eliminate it for a decade. And I'm sure that now that, you know, it's only been 48 hours since he nominated her anyway. I mean, it leaked the day before that. But like, I think that every single House Democrat is going to go to their district and be like, look, the reason that we are doing this right now is because they are trying to make sure that you don't get healthcare.
Yeah. I don't know why, by the way, this wasn't something that they were saying to their districts in January, because we have been saying for months now that healthcare is the winning issue for Democrats. And also, if you're going to have someone who has a mediocre healthcare policy, who, you know, can't offer much to anyone because he doesn't understand that a $1,000 deductible isn't affordable to most people, at least know that you have a guy who can say he got us the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Don't, like, they have taken the Republican framing of that issue and internalized it to such an extent that they're afraid to talk about their role in the Affordable Care Act. And listen, the Affordable Care Act is not perfect, but it's incredibly popular.
Right.
Obamacare is not incredibly popular, but the Affordable Care Act, which is the exact same thing, is incredibly popular. So the idea that he has not been on TV every day taking credit for the things that people like about the Affordable Care Act is wild, because it's left a vacuum where Donald Trump has gotten on TV and said he's going to save pre-existing condition coverage as if he has the power to do that. And that's something that Joe Biden actually did have a role in bringing us. Of the very few things I approve of that Joe Biden has ever done, that is one of them.
Yeah.
And he's so insistent on not campaigning to someone like me that he won't mention it.
I know. Wow.
Which is wild, because I don't think I'm that out of step with the rest of America on that particular issue.
Right. I agree. Well, I think you're going to be hearing about it more in the closing arguments of this campaign. And I think it's a good closing argument.
It's the only one it's the only closing argument.
Yeah.
And why did it have to, by the way, it came from the House. It was Nancy Pelosi that started this line of conversation this week. Why did it have to come from the House? Why didn't it come from the top? What are we even doing? Who is anybody and what are they doing? And why is a duck?
Well, we'll tell you why it hasn't been Joe Biden at the end of this podcast.
That's right. Yes.
We got a story about that.
We have a story about that. In any case, this is against the backdrop of just like everyone dying of coronavirus.
Yeah. We're up to over 7 million cases, and we finally ticked over 200,000.
Remember when it seemed
deaths.
Wild that 1 million people would get coronavirus?
Yeah.
And then it turned out now that 7 million have it.
Right.
We're just rolling with it.
And when they said that we were going to have 200,000 about right now, everyone scoffed at
But then we hit
being
that
real. But then
figure exactly.
Yeah. That number already exceeds the number of U.S. deaths from both accidents and unintentional injuries.
Yeah.
So
you are now more likely to die of coronavirus than like a car accident.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think what is starting to scare everyone. You should have been continually scared. Like there shouldn't have been a moment where you weren't scared about this. And I think that's part of the reason why we have 200,000 deaths is because we've had various times over the course of the last 6 months where people haven't been scared about this when they should have been. But anyway, it's starting to get bad again. And we've gone through sort of like waves of, I sort of still feel like we're certainly in the first wave, but like there's been waves within the wave, certainly. And like we just recently had 55,000 cases in a single day, which happened on Friday. And that was the first time since June, I believe it was, right? I think it's been months since it's been that bad. And that had been after sort of like a general, at least downward or leveling off trend since, I guess it was since August
14th.
So it's still it's been over a month. That's the highest number of cases we've had. So, and also
cases on the rise in a lot of states.
Right.
So.
22 states are on the rise. Wisconsin just had their worst day. South Dakota just had their worst day. Also, South Dakota was responsible for like literally like tens of thousands of cases because of Sturgis, their fucking motorcycle rally. So South Dakota themselves had 579 cases, but I think they've tracked that to like so many because people come in from everywhere for Sturgis. And there's some other bad news going around, like only 10%.
You probably needed more.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, we're not done with the bad news here on this front. There was a new study that found that less than 10% of Americans have actually developed antibodies. So if you're going to get to a pre-vaccine herd immunity, that's going to take like, millions and millions and millions. And like considering 7 million people have had it already and only 10% of those people have gotten the antibodies. Like if you're trying to get to some sort of herd immunity, then basically the entire country needs to get it, which would lead us to like
that
millions of
150 million people need to get coronavirus. And considering that 7 million cases caused 200,000 deaths.
Yeah.
That's not great news.
It's not great. No. And also I think scary news coming out of New York, they had 1,000 cases and some new clusters pop up. 1,000 is obviously way less than some of their worst days, but it's been the worst since June. They're the ones who have been the worst since June. That's where I had June in my head.
Oh yeah.
I knew there was a June stat somewhere coming.
Some stat with June.
Right. And
New Jersey also.
Right. And they were one of the worst hits initially, like in the very, very initial wave, had their worst case count in over 4 months.
Flu season is coming.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun.
And a season where a lot of the country is going to have to be inside.
That's right.
And I would say you should still be in your own home anyway right now. Like if you're eating outside at a restaurant, then like you're also doing it wrong, even if they're open.
I feel like there's because I think also the issue that we're going to have is not necessarily even that eating outside is the problem, or
of course
it's going to, because you can't have everyone stay in their homes for a full year. That's not a thing. Right. It's going to be that in a lot of places, the few, it's lower risk to eat outside. The few places, for the summer, everyone could do it. The places where we're starting to see cases rise are also places where if you want to leave your house at all, which you do want to in life, you're going to have to do it to an indoor location. So in New York City, they just decided to allow outdoor dining to continue through the winter. But the thing is, it's not going to be feasible to have that actually be the case in a lot of the winter months because it's going to be too cold. So the few options you had for like lower risk life things are going to be taken away. Right. So it's like, it's one thing, like, I think to some extent, like you have to let people do some things, or they just have private parties with billions of people at them. I mean, that's sort of like human behavior 101 is you can't assume that people will be able to act perfectly in an imperfect circumstance. Yeah. But, if we're concerned about a second wave in flu season, in cold weather, then the few options people had to engage socially safely are going to be removed in much of the country, and specifically in places where they're already seeing spikes.
Right.
That's something that I think also Californians don't necessarily relate to in the same way, because there's never going to be a time in California that you can't meet a friend in a park. But like there is going to be a time in New York where you can't meet a friend in a park really. Yeah. And that time is either going to meet them in their home. Right. And then you're going to go to their home and you're going to have to start making some hard choices about whether your mental health or your physical health are more important. And we can't presume that everyone is going to make the choice that their physical health is more important.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But amidst the backdrop of all of this, Nancy Pelosi has thought to herself, gee, what if we just had less coronavirus relief than we passed the last time?
Well, she's trying to think, I feel like they've been left in a weird situation because the Republicans are willing to do nothing, which is so mind-blowing.
Right.
Because normally they would be the first people to hypocritically just like give out indiscriminate money in an effort to get reelected, and then also secretly use that to give money to every corporation. But since that's actually the Democrats' agenda at this point, they've even had to sign off on rejecting that, which is wild to me. So instead, the Democrats are offering even crappier coronavirus relief funding. The Republicans are still not at the table. It's like, who even knows what's going on?
I get what she's doing here, at least politically. Like,
well, she's compromising her way back without even compromise. She's compromising with an invisible enemy.
Right. The enemy actually being moderates in her own party. Because what's happened here is that a lot of moderates and people who have either flipped seats or are in districts that sort of like need to, basically these Democrats need to be able to go back to the district and be like, we tried to do something, even though they have already passed the HEROES Act, which we didn't like for various reasons. Like, they are now sort of like, Pelosi had been thinking, look, I already passed $3.4 trillion in coronavirus aid. Like, what we need now is Republicans to come and we need to actually hash something out that we can get passed. So it didn't make any sense for her to like write a new bill that just was less money. But because of all of these Democrats like in her own caucus who are like, I have to go back to my district and say I did something, like, she's now gone back to the drawing board to barter with Republicans by having less money in this package.
I think that she's another one who I'm like, you take the sword here, or you fall on the sword here. I think that what she should do is let them revolt against her so that they can go back and say, we couldn't get the Democrats to act because they're terrible, but we got rid of their problematic leadership. I think that gives them an action they can take. We all know the political reality is...
Right, Nancy Pelosi's such a boogeyman for everyone. I mean, everyone from every political walk of life hates her.
Exactly. Fall on your sword for this so that you don't have to give up a figure.
Yeah.
Let
go
them
back
say
to your district.
That they ousted you.
Yeah, go back to your district and say that you fought Nancy Pelosi on something.
Yeah. That's in a swing district, that's all they want to hear. They don't like Nancy Pelosi as much as they don't like Donald Trump.
No.
So be willing to fall on your sword for something. That's where I think we keep getting it wrong. We all understand this is all just like behind the scenes bullshit.
Yeah.
Everything is a decision. You know, anytime that someone makes a principled vote, they've been given permission to do it. We know that. Every time that someone has a stance that's unpopular, it's because someone else has agreed to take a stance that's not quite right for their district. Like, this is all always decided behind the scenes. Yeah. And if that's the case, then go in for some high theater, as we've been advocating in every part of this conversation, but like, go in for some high theater, tell your party that they can fillet you in an effort to win back their seats while you hold the line on the figure.
Right. Yeah.
And then you just act unreasonable until the end of the term, when the Republicans can be like, they can't really say that the Democrats aren't doing anything because they're ousting Nancy Pelosi, but they also can't do anything because she won't give up on the figure. And then in the next term, have someone even worse than Nancy Pelosi be the majority leader.
Yeah.
Let AOC be the majority leader the next, tell them you're going to oust her and then go with someone even crazier. But my point is, use the drama. She promised us she wasn't going to do another term of this. I mean, I think we all know she lied, but there were promises made. So let them oust you.
Yep.
Come up with it.
I like it.
I want to see like whole layers of like a Shakespearean drama lay out over the next 3 months so that at every turn, as the Republicans are busy pulling the craziest bullshit we've ever seen, everyone is like, what the fuck are the Democrats doing though? Like, I want everyone to be shocked and confused and concerned by how much high drama the Democrats are generating.
Same.
Otherwise, what are they doing? Kabuki theater. In any case. So, we're never going to see a bill, so I don't know why we're even talking about this. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Listen, you guys. The Breonna Taylor verdict came down.
Right.
And it is,
or the charges came down.
Sorry.
Right.
And it is not what you want. Because basically, the only person who got indicted at all got indicted for firing shots into a neighboring white family's apartment, basically.
Yeah, for endangering the people that he didn't kill.
That's right. But no one is in trouble for endangering Breonna Taylor, who is now a dead person.
That's right.
So basically, one of the 3 cops that was on the hook here, Brett Hankinson, was given account of first-degree wanton endangerment because he, like so many of these guys, was indiscriminately firing a round into an apartment complex, and some of those bullets went into a neighbor's house.
Right.
And those were just like some couple with a baby and the woman was pregnant. And so everyone felt really bad about the pregnant woman, not apparently that bad about the dead woman.
Correct.
But, and I would contend that this is a fair charge. You should certainly be charged with something if you're indiscriminately firing bullets into random people's homes. For sure. I would say that there should be additional charges when you have fired those bullets into a random person's home and then also killed them.
That's right. I think that's what people were looking for.
I think that's what people were looking for here.
Yeah.
So, and neither of the other 2 officers that also fired their weapons at Breonna Taylor's apartment. And by the way, one of these is the guy who actually killed her. There were 5 shots that hit her. One is the one that killed her. The coroner decided which one was the one. That shot was fired by Miles Cosgrove, who has not been charged with anything, even though all 3 of them were just firing indiscriminately at her. They had to do a special report to find out whose bullet killed her because all of them were just firing at her.
Right.
Again, just a random woman, an innocent woman in her home.
Correct.
Anyway, you guys know the story. You could tell that things were amiss because people were acting real squirrely in the Kentucky AG office earlier in the day before they announced the charges. And the attorney general there said that he expects no further criminal charges to be filed.
Yeah.
So obviously protests started immediately.
Yeah.
Just like imagine being in this political environment and thinking like this is an acceptable resolution to this case.
Yeah.
Like just last week, everyone was celebrating that they had given Breonna Taylor's family a $12 million settlement and there were going to be police reforms and all these things. And now it seems like the only person who's happy with these charges is Donald Trump.
Right.
Also, racist everywhere. This guy, Hankinson, was booked in Shelby County Jail for a full 32 minutes and then posted his $15,000 cash bail and is going to plead not guilty. This is a man who was kicked off the force because in that whole scene, he indiscriminately fired 10 rounds randomly into a random apartment complex, including into units that they were not even there to investigate, which is not only not a thing you should do as a policeman, but also not a thing you should get away with doing as a human.
Correct.
He should be held to an even higher standard.
I was going to say, the reason that he is getting away with it is because
he's a policeman. And I would contend that maybe someone who works for us and is paid by our tax dollars should be held to an even higher standard than a random indiscriminate human.
Right, who we're paying to keep us safe in theory.
Right, exactly.
Is not doing so by firing 10 rounds indiscriminately into apartment buildings.
So Louisville's been protesting for days. Other protests have sprung up. There have been protests here. There have been ones in New York. They have curfews and other martial law type tactics going on in Louisville. It's not great, you guys. It's not a great scene. And also, this is such a wild one in part because Breonna Taylor really became like one of the main rallying cries of the Black Lives Matter movement. So because that case was so over the top, because she was literally a person sleeping in her home, in her bed, because, the facts of that case, not that all of these, cases of just like indiscriminate police murder of Black people are not all uniformly horrible. But I think this one in particular had really captured people's imagination because it was like so over the top and ridiculous. And to have this be the verdict or to be the charge is
I know.
Right. It's not even going to be the verdict because, by the way, I bet they're not going to charge him.
Right. Well, in so many instances of these,
or law terms, whatever.
And look, I don't want you to get it twisted in the sense that I agree with any of these things, but like in so many of these things, there are racists who will say like, oh, but he was selling illegal cigarettes on the street. Or, oh, he resisted arrest.
He had a counterfeit $20 bill.
Or, maybe he stole Skittles from a 7-Eleven or something like that.
He had a toy gun and we thought it was real.
Right. There's always been, not always, but in most instances, there has been something like that. And while none of those reasons are reasons to murder someone. Right. This one was devoid of any of those things.
Yeah, there was no excuse that was like, but we thought she was a threat because of X, Y, and Z thing. She's like literally a person who was accidentally murdered by the police in a search that had nothing to do with her. So she is like her next door neighbor being wantonly endangered. The only difference is that it was in her own space and also that she was murdered.
Right. Well, and you have to wonder also if the people that were wantonly endangered were not white, would we even have charges at all?
I mean,
because they
not.
were. I mean, I feel like that has been an important part of this story because like I feel like they probably just all would have gotten off had he, because like what's endangering a black person? If you can kill one,
apparently apparently there's no risk for a policeman in doing anything as long as the victim is black. There's so many layers to this story that I think, I mean, it's sort of uniquely troubling because there's no even fake excuse for it. There's no way to fake justify it in rhetoric even. It's like so just sort of, it's so cruel and ridiculous just on the face of it. But also like every detail of it is kind of layers in a new kind of insult. And this is, by the way, like if you are like a person who is just like, I don't know, you're white and you're sick of hearing about this and you're just kind of like, whatever, just like know that this is like a problem that belongs to all of us, not just because it, from a moral perspective and a taxpayer perspective, belongs to all of us, but this kind of sort of this kind of openly discriminatory thinking is actually just a dangerous way for, it's a dangerous kind of, it's a dangerous thing for any of us to live under. It's not, there's a reason that you don't kind of, there's a reason that you should personalize this, even if you don't see yourself reflected in Breonna Taylor. Right. And I think that a lot of the time, the way that, you know, coverage of these issues happens is it gets covered as if it's an issue we shouldn't all see ourselves reflected in. And while certainly you can't see yourself reflected in the experience of a Black person in America, there are elements of this that you should see your own experience reflected in, just in that you like live in a society where this kind of breach of justice is a sort of is in the atmosphere, it's in the air, and that means that it can be applied to whoever is convenient to apply it to in that moment, and that in the wrong moment that can mean you too. So this is just like not a logical leap you want your society to be able to make.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like it really is everyone's problem.
Yeah.
So I think the coverage often does not. The memes reflect that, but the coverage doesn't reflect that.
Agreed. Yeah.
In any case, Tuesday, first debate of the presidential season. You guys,
my gosh.
I don't know what to think about this.
I don't know either.
Donald Trump is trying to accuse Joe Biden of taking some sort of mental steroids or something.
So he's done this before where, and I don't remember if we talked about it or not, but we certainly were talking about it in a text thread with Grant, who's going to be on next week talking about the debate with us, by the way. He tweeted that he said, I will be strongly demanding a drug test of sleepy Joe Biden.
Capitalized drug test. Why? No one knows.
Prior to or after the debate on Tuesday night. Naturally, I will agree to take one also. His debate performances have been record-setting uneven, to put it mildly. Only drugs could have caused this discrepancy.
So many questions. The first being, what debate performances? The man hasn't been in a debate in over 10 years.
Well, right. I mean, he's talking about in the Democratic debates, certainly. And while I can see what he's talking about in the sense that there were times when he was better than others.
Did I just forget the entire era of Democratic debates? I was just like, when's the last time Joe Biden was in a debate? And I thought of his VP debate.
You did. Yeah. Which totally forgot about all of
15 years ago.
Remember when he was talking about how, like, you know,
the record player,
Black people should make sure to say words to their children and
put the record player on at night? I sure do.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, guys. I'm with us now.
and because of some of those debate performances, I would contend that Joe Biden has not been taking steroids.
We know for sure that there's no mental steroids being taken by Joe Biden because his debate performances were uneven.
There have been times where he didn't say things like that, and people declared that he had a much better night because he basically like stood upright and spoke in complete sentences for like an hour and a half. So if that is uneven, then sure. But
I also have a concern about this debate in particular being like comedically pseudo macho body language heavy without being word heavy.
Yeah.
They're both going to be saying gibberish. I would not listen to a word anyone says in this debate. This is going to be a body language debate, because one thing we know about Joe Biden is when he gets challenged, he gets this kind of like weird, scrappy, gruff, threatening behavior that just sort of takes over him. He tells people not to vote for him. He calls women, what did he call that woman in Iowa? Like a horse face,
pony soldier.
Right. So he doesn't have great grasp of his temper.
No, he doesn't.
No, Donald Trump doesn't.
No.
And the two of them are famous for kind of boiling over in these weird fake macho ways that are really just exactly what men who feel emasculated do all the time.
Yeah.
Like they're not real macho behavior. They're like,
I totally agree with you.
Sure.
The one thing that I would say in regards to that is that I think to a certain degree, look, that type of behavior should be rewarded, ever, right?
Never.
Like we should not congratulate either of them for behaving like that. I do think that there will be some reward to Joe Biden if he decides to do something like that, because it will be seen as him standing up to him in ways that like people have not done.
I disagree. I think that that Donald Trump will be rewarded for it, because he always is, and that Joe Biden will be penalized for it, because I think it's not something that Democratic voters are comfortable seeing in their leaders. I think there is a reason that kind of scrappy fight mentality, I think, might work with some of the voters Biden is going after in the center, but with the bulk of his base is going to be incredibly uncomfortable. I think that's why he wasn't doing well in the primaries for so long, was because I think that when you remember when he tried to pull something like that with Liz Warren at one point, and everyone was like, oh, hey, no.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's not what Democrats, they want to see that their leader is educated and, and they want to make him, they get impressed when he's from a fancy school, and those kinds of things trigger Democrats in a way.
I think you're right, but so many people have been, people know that Democrats have been calling Donald Trump a bully for years. And I think I think that there would be some level of pleasure to see himself be bullied.
I think though that I noticed myself even really post Kavanaugh hearings, reading that behavior very differently from even the Democratic men in my circle, and discussing this with other women. I've noticed that kind of behavior really reads very threatening to us and doesn't often to Democratic men. And I think that they really need white women to show up for this guy.
For sure.
They need a group of people who are not necessarily going to be comfortable with that kind of show to show up for this guy. And they need some of those people to do it in defiance of their husbands. And I think if he seems too much like their husbands, if he seems too much like he reacts the way Donald Trump reacts, that he's kind of, I know this is a word we use only with women, but if he seems too emotional and doesn't seem like he can be, people liked that Obama kind of always kept his cool. So you always felt like he was always going to be thinking straight in a crisis moment. And I don't think we're going to see that from Joe Biden. And I think, I don't know that it will read, I don't know that it will read poor, as threatening or as frustrating to Democratic men, but I think it definitely will to women. And I think that the campaign won't admit that and won't think about that, because who cares about women? Nobody. Yeah. But I think that is something that I worry about a lot with Joe Biden, because I think that that's one of the reasons that enthusiasm for him is so lacking, is that a lot of us see in him behavior reflected that is sort of exactly why someone like Donald Trump is able to get elected in the first place. And competing with that same behavior doesn't really distinguish you from him in an appropriate way. Because we're talking now, like, if the center is going to come with that, then what, like, I get that, populism is often, on both the right and left, often involves sort of like a kind of charisma of bullying, like that's a charismatic movement often. Yeah. I'm reading Thomas Frank's new book on populism right now. I'm gonna have lots of thoughts on that. But I don't think it's gonna read super well from the part of the party that's like the technocratic, overly educated, sort of knows better than you wing of the party. I think it's gonna make people be like, wait a minute, this isn't if we're just going to have bullies here? Who fucking cares about anything?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh
boy. Well, I know that he's not going to let himself be bullied.
No, I just think that often he reacts in a way that's not
totally
thoughtful
does.
In those moments.
I
And
agree.
that lack of thought is going to read as threatening to a lot of women who are used to being on that end of that kind, who are used to having that be the thing that disempowers them in a room full of men.
I totally agree. I think it will be interesting to see how he handles it, because I think it's a fine line also to then, not do that and seem weak too.
Right.
Because,
no, I agree.
It's hard. I think he's in a tricky spot because Trump is going to do what Trump's going to do, and people are going to love what Trump is going to do, other than we're not going to love what he's going to do, but he doesn't.
But it's going to be entertaining.
Right. And he's going to be less nitpicked for his behavior than Biden is.
Of course.
I think you're right about that. Certainly.
But I think we're in a unique situation where actually a female candidate would have had an easier time bullying him than Joe Biden. I think so too.
Like a Liz Warren in this debate right now, just ruining him.
She could have bullied him. But I think it's the specific kind of bullying, because Joe Biden's not going to bully him intellectually. He's going to try to bully him physically the way that Trump tries to bully people physically. And that is going to read as threatening to Joe Biden's voters in a way that it won't to Donald Trump's voters.
What if they get in a fight?
Oh my God. What if there's a fist fight between two septuagenarians on national television? Oh my God. That would be the dream.
That I would
Remember
watch.
When Sherman Berman almost had a fight?
Sure
During
do.
the Sherman Berman year almost had a fist fight. That was the most amazing 10 minutes of YouTube television I've ever seen.
Yep.
But this feels like a combination that could result in the silliest fist fight that's ever been seen by anyone in America.
Yeah.
And that would effectively destroy both of their political careers in a great way, because there is literally no way that Donald Trump looks cool in a fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
In any case, before we go to the final story, 2 more props to just briefly bother you about, although we are going to have a special prop edition.
Yep.
Prop 20 is a prop where we're literally making felony charges worse in this state. And just read the room. That's a big no.
That's a no.
That's a prop. That was the last prop that we did. And Brent was like, don't worry, it's an easy one. And I went and looked it up and I was like, come on.
I know.
Who has time? And then Prop 21, we just want to quickly mention that because of the glory of the California petitioning system, we have an identical rent control prop back on the ballot from 2018, and you should vote for it, and you should love every moment of it. And if you are thinking to yourself, but I aspire to being a rich landlord one day, and this prop will ruin my rich landlording, just know it doesn't actually legislate anything. It just means that your community can vote to institute new rent control laws.
Yeah.
So it doesn't impose any new laws.
Because right now they can't, by the way.
Right. Right now, your community, if your whole community, 100% of the people in your community decided we need stronger rent control in this community, including the landlords, everyone wants stronger rent control. We want to extend rent control to buildings built after 1978. Then you would discover that you can't actually do that because the state law prohibits you from protecting renters further than the extent to which the state allows. So
right.
I would contend that that's something that's up to your community because you know your housing issues better than anyone else.
That's right. You sure do.
And that's something that you should vote for. So in any case, those are our 2 props for this week. And then in final news,
right,
the lid. This is both the lid to our podcast and also a discussion of the lid as a concept.
Yeah, you may have heard about it this week because it has sort of spilled out into certain, not really popular language, but at least it's been out there. It's been on
News
Twitter.
Language.
Trump has been using it now in his campaign rallies. It's apparently his campaign aides. It's their new favorite part of his rally bit because it always gets a good laugh. So anyway, but a lid is this arcane term that is used with reporters when a politician declares that they are done traveling for the day or basically done campaigning for the day. So Biden has been calling lids this week pretty much immediately upon getting out of bed.
That's right.
1:00 on Friday. That was the latest lid all week. Thursday was 9:20 a.m. Tuesday was 9:22 a.m. and Saturday was 8:34 a.m. So he's basically been getting out of bed, having his morning coffee, and then sending out a lid that the day's over with.
That's right.
So
one might ask, why bother?
Well, that's what I think. It's just sort of I think that, again, this is sort of one of those things where that campaign is sort of working under sort of like classic campaign norms where it would like make sense to do that. It's sort of basically a kindness to the press, right? It's sort of
to be like, there's nothing to cover later today.
You can
so
go home. We're not doing anything for the rest of the day. Like, we're not going to surprise you. Like, if you're in the press pool, it's like, go have dinner, right? Or in this case, go have breakfast. You know, you can have a Bloody Mary at breakfast because it's okay for you to be drunk the rest of the day because you're not going to have to do anything. So I would just contend that they don't need to do that. And look, especially if it's going to get you made fun of, because like Trump continually is making fun of him for doing it, and it's catching on. It's catching on Twitter. It's like people are talking about the lids now. It's been on Fox News. It's been talking about the lids. And it's like, and also the reason that he has been doing it is because he's been doing debate prep this week. So he's been either doing like one event first thing, like that has been like from his basement, some sort of like digital event, or like some press conference, like first thing. And then he's going to do debate prep. So it's like, just don't announce a lid. Just be like, hey, now we're going to go do debate prep. Right? It's like
the rest of the day's activities are debate prep. You can't come. Think about that.
Right.
I mean, that's easy peasy. In any case, just another way that we are pretending we live in a world that no longer exists and therefore unable to contend with the realities of today.
Stop following norms.
Yeah, there are no more norms. If no one else is following the norms, they aren't norms anymore.
That's right.
They're just arbitrary, silly things you're doing.
Yeah.
So don't even worry about it.
Nope.
Run your campaign however you want.
Yeah.
Don't run it because you're not even doing anything. Your campaign is just you in a basement. It's for what seems to be only 10 minutes a day. So I don't even know why bother with any of this.
You don't have to.
It's madness.
Madness.
In any case, that's the news this week.
Really?
Look out for our prop guide next week.
It's coming this week. This week.
I mean, this week, right. If you are a person who is not on our list or does not, we're going to post it on social and whatnot. But if you want us to email it straight into your inbox because you are so excited to read it, because it's going to be fun, you guys. It's a fun prop guide because we're trying to make it at least readable. Then, send us a DM. We'll email it to you. We'll add you to our mailing list for it so that you get it with the first wave. So you have it
first wave
right at the beginning. In any case, we'll talk to you next week. And we'll be back with Grant next week to talk about the debate, which is something to look forward to.
We'll probably be social media-ing up a storm on debate night too.
I would keep tabs on our Twitter account, Instagram account during debate times. We'll talk to you then and next week.
Bye.